my friend and wife, obviously, and Priyanka is a good friend. So we are arranging in that way Bioingene.
So we are live now.
Yes, I think we are live. I'm going to check in the YouTube also.
It indicates that yes, it's live.
Yes, we are live.
Okay, so we're going to start.
And I will start the recording now.
Yes, okay, you can start. So Priyanka, I can just initially you doing the introductions, and I think you have all the script and all.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start.
So I can hear
thanks.
some ad. So can you please? Okay, so that is
okay. No, it's the different. Whenever you start, it's going to start actually.
Okay, so let's begin.
Yes. Thanks everybody. It's a pleasure for all of us to have such an eminent scientist, and you can say as one of the leader in plant science community. It's lots of work, and not only science. There is a lot of administrative and management also. So we are very excited to hear you today in this webinar, because as you know, our main audience is from most of the developing countries. So we are love to hear and learn something from you. And thanks, Priyanka, for organizing such a webinar. This webinar is credit goes to you actually. And thanks every participants for joining in this time. And please keep participating in our webinars and activities. It's all for free for everyone. And the recording will be available in same link in same channel. So you can whatever and what part you wanted to review, you can view rewatch from the recording part. Today is going to be held by Priyanka, Dr. Priyanka and Shoma, and that pattern is quite similar. We are going for the first the talk, then the interaction session, and finally the question and answer. Please post all the questions in your YouTube chat box. Enable the YouTube chat box if it is not showing in your system. And at the end, we are providing a link, which is a feedback you can say the certificate application link. And those are lively, fill this link through the after the webinar, and also registered, and we'll get a certificate after 2-3 days. And we'll intimate about when we uploaded by our website, and it's need to be downloaded from the website bioingene.com/certificates. So let's start. I request Priyanka, please go for the next step.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to another exciting Bioingene webinar. So I would like to provide you a very short introduction of Bioingene first. So Bioingene is a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting global plant research. Our webinar series serve as a platform for plant scientists worldwide to showcase their research and ideas. Our aim is to inspire and provide valuable insight to future scientists, fostering the growth and development of plant sciences. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to the distinguished plant researchers who have graciously accepted our invitation to share their research and expertise with us. We are honored to have such esteemed scientists as a part of our Bioingene family. And we are also incredibly thankful to all of you, our valued viewers, for our unwavering support and interest in Bioingene webinar. The response and the enthusiasm we have received have been overwhelming. For those who haven't registered yet, we encourage you to do so through our website, bioingene.com, and our social media pages. You can join us live for all our webinar or catch up by watching the recording on our Bioingene YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our upcoming live events. Following today's talk, We invite you to provide feedback via the link provided and apply for a certificate of participation. Your engagement and interaction are vital to us. Please feel free to type in your questions related to today's topic in the YouTube chat box for the Q&A session. Once again, we appreciate your presence and active involvement in the Bioingene community. Let's make this webinar an enriching experience together. The topic of today's webinar is Agriculture in a Hyper-Connected World, Developing Impactful Research and Partnership by Professor Maricelis Acevedo. So I would like to give a brief introduction of today's speaker. We are delighted to extend an invitation to Dr. Maricelis Acevedo, a distinguished researcher professor and the director of the FEED, the Future Insect Resistant Eggplant Partnership. Dr. Acevedo holds the position of Associate Director for Science in the Department of Global Development at Cornell University, where she also contributes to the Delivering the Genetic Gain in Wheat project. Dr. Acevedo's involvement in the Borlaug Global Initiative list that we popularly known as BGRI highlights her commitment to global food security and her collaboration with a diverse network of wheat scientists. Her expertise extends beyond academia as she provides guidance and support to the National Agriculture Research Program in Ethiopia, Kenya, South Asia, and enhancing breeding and pathology capacities. In recognition of her remarkable contribution, Dr. Acevedo was appointed the Director of USAID Feed the Future Insect Resistant Eggplant Partnership in 2020. Her efforts have resulted in significant reduction in the use of insecticide in farmer field in the Bangladesh, while simultaneously increasing crop yield through the adoption of BT eggplant. Prior to joining Cornell University, Dr. Acevedo served as assistant professor in the plant pathology department at North Dakota State University. She completed her PhD in biology, specializing in plant pathology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Additionally, she gained valued experience as a postdoctoral fellow at the USDA ARS Potato and Small Grain Research Unit in Aberdeen, Idaho. Dr. Acevedo's contribution to the field of plant pathology have been recognized through various appointments, including adjunct associate professor in the plant pathology and plant microbiology section at Cornell University School of Integrated Plant Science. She also served as an international professor of plant pathology and plant microbiology within the same institution, actively participating in graduate student thesis committee. It is with great honor and gratitude that we invite Dr. Maricelis Acevedo to be a guest speaker on the Bioingene platform. We eagerly anticipate the knowledge and insight she will share with our audience. Over to you, Dr. Maricelis.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, and thank you so much to all of you for joining in your busy schedules. I know we all have so many things to do, so good evening and good morning to those of you joining us from all over the world. It's impressive to see the number of registrants and the diversity of our community. I'm really honored to be here today, and thanks so much to Bioingene for creating this platform so that we can reach more and more scientists, inspire them, but also learn from them, your experience. So what I want to do, I want to go over my presentation, and then I would love to hear your questions and insights, because I learn a lot from the process and understanding more how to better serve our community of researchers. I love interacting with, especially with early career scientists. So I'm here to support your efforts, and I look forward to our conversation after. So like it was introduced, today I want to talk about agriculture in a hyper-connected world, and especially on how to develop impactful research and partnership. We all know how to do science. We've been scientists for a long time, but how do we make sure that our science can fit today's world, but also that we can take advantage of all the connectivity that exists in the world? So this is how what I'm going to cover. I'm going to start by defining hyperconnected world, how I define it and how I'm using it in this presentation. Hyperconnectivity's impact on science. What is hyperconnectivity? How is it impacting our science? how we can conduct relevant science in a hyper-connected world. And I'm going to present a couple of these case studies that are the ones that Priyanka introduced in terms of my involvement with the different organizations and projects and initiatives. And then I want to talk to you about the opportunities and challenges of being a scientist today in the 21st century, again, with this amount of information and connectivity in the world. And then I want to talk about call to action, because that's what we're here for, not only to learn, but say, like, how can I get this to the field? How can I apply this knowledge? How can I prepare for the next iteration of science? So let's start with defining hyper-connected world. So never before the world has been so connected. Can we agree on that? Hyperconnectivity in its narrow sense means is the use of multiple systems and devices to remain constantly connected to social networks and streams of information. So again, we're talking about using multiple systems and devices to remain constantly connected to social networks and streams of information. So that's in the narrow sense. I'm using the term hyper-connected world to describe a world that due to and thanks to technology and scientific advances, we are able now to physically and digitally connect faster and more often than ever before. Thus, in an era of hyperconnection, the physical, digital, cultural, social, and economic boundaries are disappearing. Think about it. We are more connected. We can fly from New York to India in 14.5 hours. That tells you that we can move pathogens, knowledge, data so quickly that we can use this to really engage in science. So think about it in the early 2020, as the world realized that a global human and animal pathogen pandemic, COVID-19 was unfolding, it was clear that the impacts of COVID-19 were much bigger than just medical. As we know now, it impacted all areas of our life, including travel, trade, shopping, value chains, our jobs, food security, prices, how we communicate, how we learn, education, and also technology. But also, it affected our trust in institutions, and especially the trust in science and in news, information. So with that in mind, let's think about how do we do science in this world? And again, what does it mean to be a scientist in a hyper-connected world, and how can we move forward? So let's start with going back, 1945, Dr. Norman Borlaug leveraged the plant genetics diversity, and the plasticity of wheat to avert hunger for millions of people, and also avert political unrest in many countries by challenging and changing crop breeding and adaptability assumptions. Again, changing the way that we look at breeding, challenging those assumptions that till then we thought it was the only way forward. So what did he do? He said, okay, if I want to breed wheat for the world, I need to replicate the world. And he started breeding using what is called the shuttle breeding program. So he was in Mexico, where now it's cement fields, and he started moving the wheat from high elevation to low elevation, from dry to humid environments, because what he was trying to do is evaluating the different conditions of wheat, where wheat is grown, so mimicking that wheat world. So he did that, and not only that he was able to, again, identify and select the best of the wheat that can fit in different environments in the world, but also he can have more than one selection pressure during the year, more than one selection cycle. And by using that technology, he was able to really push forward breeding practices and make it even more efficient than it was before. And what he did, he also started sending that wheat around the world to a global, and it's important, global network of scientists. And that created that first hyperconnectivity, because never before we had access to that many fields in the world, that information. And then that's a tradition that continues until, today. And it has inspired that community of practice, community of scientists that exchange data, exchange information. So that, like I said, continues today. And it was what inspired the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative. It was that same Norman Borlaug that sounded the alarm, the father of the Green Revolution, that sounded the alarm to USAID and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Department for International Development in the UK, now called FCDO, about UG99. Remember that race of wheat stem rust, that was a new race that was coming out of East Africa. That was in 1998. And the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative then was launched out of that need and that call to action that he was able to push forward through donors and our community. And it was established then in 2005, the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative. For those of you that are not familiar with UG99, like I mentioned, it was the new race of the stem rust, wheat rust, stem rust pathogen that emerged in Uganda in 1998. And it started to spread and mutate across all East Africa. It took about 10 years for the donors to realize that large threat that UG99 represented to the world, if UG99 were to be found in main producing wheat areas of the world outside of East Africa, especially if we were to get like to China, to South Asia, the breadbasket of the world in India and in the Midwest. So our job as a community of scientists was to reduce the threat of and limit the movement of UG99 by developing rust-resistant wheat lines that will reduce that inoculum load that was getting out into the countries where it was already present. Because we knew we cannot eradicate it. We knew that we cannot stop the movement because it's airborne. It moves with the wind from country to country. It doesn't respect boundaries, country boundaries. So it took an international community of scientists and organizations like CIMMYT, ICARDA, Cornell, FAO, to bring together that expertise, that knowledge, those platforms, that reach, to then launch what it became the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative as we know it today. And it was important that we took that global approach because global threats require global solutions and global perspective. We needed to bring the best of the world, understand their challenges, the opportunities, the limitation they had in their organization, the knowledge they have, the experience, and bring them all together, their data, their knowledge, to this initiative so that we can exchange knowledge, data. And that it was like the signature of the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative. Now, it seems like almost like a no-brainer, like everybody does it now, understand why, but at that time in 2008, it was revolutionary to say, we're going to exchange data, materials, we are going to send people for training all over the world so that we build this foundation of knowledge and global knowledge so that we can have new partnerships that are actually effective and that are inclusive. So we took a new approach to it because the time required a new approach, new science. So we took a multifaceted, holistic approach. So we not only were going to focus on the science, we were going to do, the pathogen surveillance, the genomic selection, the gene discovery, but also we were going to do seed multiplication in specific areas for like breeder seed. We also needed to look at capacity building, the knowledge, because stem rust was such a huge problem in the past, and for decades we didn't see it, but there was not that expertise available in the world. There was only a handful of scientists that have seen rust, understood stem rust. So we needed to build that capacity in national programs, and then we needed to make the system more equitable because we realized that all, the majority of our scientists, especially those that were in leadership roles, were males. So we needed to include gender equity and capacity building in our program, and then advocacy, because we knew that to have the necessary funding to do what we wanted to do, we needed to communicate with the public and with donors, with policymakers about why they needed to care, why they needed to support their research institutions in their countries. So thanks to that, we were able to build this global pathogen surveillance system that as of 2022, we had over 40,000 georeference surveys records from over 40 countries. And it took all these laboratories around the world to come together in terms of exchanging protocols, isolates, data, information of how to do what we were discovering to be able to build this system. So we have national laboratories, we had then regional laboratories, and then we have international reference centers like the one in Denmark that is our Global Rust Reference Center, where all the data is collected, archived, the isolates that are unique are received, where data analysis is done and then spread to the world, so we know we can build our next activity that was the early warning systems. So in addition to collect all this data and isolate, we needed to understand the path because of the rust, because we didn't understand completely how the rust pathogen was moving across the different continents. So by working with collaborations, again, from different parts of the world, especially the University of Cambridge and the UK Met Office, and working with CIMMYT and Ethiopia scientists at EIAR, we were able to develop this forecasting map and looking at airborne dispersal of roots of pathogens, the rust spores, and then use that for early warning system for forecasting the potential for incursion of pathogens from one place to another. Remember, I'm a plant pathologist by training, and then I've been able to work with a lot of interdisciplinary scientists. We work with epidemiologists, we work with breeders, and we needed to put together all these different pieces. So we have been very, very lucky of working with such a diverse and expertise from all over the world. And that's what allow us to do, for example, the early warning framework in Ethiopia. So this brings together, again, institutions from multiple countries in different technologies, different disciplines. So then we use this early warning system for decision making. So the government of Ethiopia will have information right away, so they can then send alerts to the public about when to spray fungicides if they have susceptible varieties of wheat on the ground. And we get information every 7 days about the dispersal, the suitability of the environmental conditions for disease development. And then we're learning more about what varieties are on the ground. We get data from susceptibility or resistance. Now we can also bring in real-time diagnostic using the MinION developed by the team at the John Innes Center under Diane Saunders' leadership. The MinION system allows us to, in a couple of days, being able to identify if the yellow rust pathogen spores that we're seeing on the ground belong to one of the rust that we already know of the races, or is it something new that we need to check right away and identify virulence. But we're also working with Plant Village, getting pictures from the ground, not only from expert scientists, but also from the public, so we can keep track of rust. And then we have our expert also doing the surveillance, taking data from the ground, surveying the wheat fields so that we get the most complete data. And then that fits into the model and sends, again, advisories. Under the umbrella of the BGRI and our two projects, the Durable Rust Resistant in Wheat and the Delivery and Genetic Gain in Wheat project, we supported international disease screening platforms. And this was really important, again, because it was one of a kind. For the first time, we have set up nurseries in disease hotspot locations that were available and accessible to scientists around the world. So it was not only about planting the germplasm, the wheat germplasm in Kenya or in Ethiopia, but inviting people to send their germplasm from their universities, their research institution, and then come into the field, get their data, but also receive training or provide training to early career scientists and scientists from national programs that were not so familiar with the disease, but now have to work on it. So we use this platform not only as data collection system, but as sharing of data, sharing of information, sharing of germplasm, and training. And it was fascinating because for years, we will continue to go every year, continue to train scientists. So today, we have over 600,000 lines that have been evaluated in Kenya and in Ethiopia from 25 different countries. And this platform, again, have trained over 1,200 scientists. We then decide that this information about Rust was really important, but we needed that engine, that breeding program that can take all this information and move it as fast as possible through the breeding cycles so that the farmers and the consumer had new varieties of wheat that were disease resistant to protect that food security and manage, the risk of stem rust and yellow rust in the field. So we moved then into using genomic selection and high-throughput phenotyping in the breeding programs, in different breeding programs, but especially at CIMMYT and national programs that were developing these varieties for the world, so that again, we can get the most amount of information in the shortest amount of time, and then put it through the pipeline so that we can expedite the process of breeding new varieties. And now this is an official methodology at CIMMYT, and that is the largest breeding program, wheat breeding program in the world. And these have resulted in over 270 wheat varieties with improved agronomic traits, climate resilience, and disease resistance in at-risk countries. And we define it at-risk countries as the countries that were in the path of UG99 and other variants, and that we wanted to protect, the basket of the world, that if we were to put the resistant varieties in the path of the rust, we will reduce that inoculant pressure, we will reduce the chances of mutations, and develop, a system that will be more sustainable for managing rust diseases. And like I mentioned, we went beyond just the technical components. We knew it required a global community, a global effort, global understanding and exchange. So we spent a lot of time and resources and effort in building this scientific community, building on the strength of that community, sharing that strength and sharing that knowledge across the different platforms. And so we held many workshops, training opportunities, leadership opportunities, but we spent a lot of time in the field. And I'm so grateful for the chance to meet so many of you in the world by working with you side by side, collecting data, helping with training, facilitating opportunities for development, professional development. And that to me is the most rewarding part, knowing that we are engaging the next generation of scientists, empowering the scientists in national programs by providing the right information so that we can continue to build a strong partnership around the world, that we can communicate, because we need to know how we collect data, how we share that data, how do we score the disease, what publications are coming out, so that we can communicate more effectively. And like I mentioned earlier, we also needed to strengthen our community by bringing more women scientists to our community and move them through the pipeline of not only research, but also leadership. And, think about how can we develop the greatest technologies and solutions of the world if we do not empower or include, or we underestimate the knowledge of half of the population. It is a study after study has shown that the more diverse teams are more productive, they are better at finding solutions. So we wanted to create that diversity in our institutions. So we have now over 70 women in Triticum early career awardees that are taking scientific, academic, and leadership positions around the world. And some of them may be in the audience today. We also recognized that we needed to communicate with the general public because there's so much to tell people that we sometimes get involved in our jargons and talking about to ourselves or publishing, but we don't think about necessarily what does it take to communicate to the public so they understand the challenges that farmers have every day to produce the food they're eating, and that they understand also how that food that is produced is the product of so much science to get it just right. So also, I think that if the people understand more and more where their food comes from and what it takes to develop that food, we will be more willing to pay for the food that we eat at the level that we have to understand the true cost of wasting food, understanding then the science behind it, so we trust it and we are more willing to try new products in the market and to have a more complete and balanced diet. We also needed to make sure that donors and policymakers understood what was really needed for developing these technologies. That is not 1 year of funding, that it takes years, decades to develop these new varieties and to be prepared to respond to threats. So we don't have to build a new system every single time, but we have the system in place that it can really support scientists and to respond to crisis more efficiently. And I'm so excited to see that those collaborations under the BGRI umbrella have inspired new collaborations, some involving us, some involving other members. And you may be familiar with some of these, but the Woman in Crop Science, again, it's broadening that those ideas that we started with the Woman in Triticum. Now we involve in that group many scientists, from women scientists from all the crop sciences. I'm part of that, a member of that group, but it's led by Alison Bentley and her team and Summit, and then it shares knowledge and a platform to recognize the effort of all women in crop science. The Rust Watch project in Europe, that again, it builds on the resources developed under the Rust Toolbox, the stem rust and yellow rust toolbox, developed under the BGRI umbrella. The Open We Blast, it was an amazing result of, again, how to respond fast to new threats and taking a different approach of how to share data instantly and making it more accessible. The Wheat Initiative continues to then bringing together the wheat community every couple of years and developing working groups so that the community stays together and shares information. The Marple diagnostic developed by Diane Saunders, again, it takes from understanding the diversity that exists of pathogens out there, and I'll say, how can we get the information faster and quicker and the necessary information? It may not be all the information that we can get, but we can get the most important information so that we can make decision making. And then the newest project I'm involved, that is the Wheat Disease Early Warning and Advisory System, Wheat D1s, that now broadens from rust now to include wheat blast and potentially fusarium, in addition to rust, for early warning systems across East Africa and South Asia. And of course, empowering the next generation of hunger fighters is something that never stops. We do it formally and informally, and it has inspired me to see that those that we have trained now train others in our community. And there's no better satisfaction than actually seeing how our national program scientists take on leadership positions and now They train their scientists in their own countries and institutions, share their information, share about the international community expectations and standards for publication, for research, etc. And they take on this lead, this leadership role, even sometimes without being a true mandate from the organization, but because they're passionate, because they want to pay it forward in their countries. So the other project that I have been involved on initiative is the Feed the Future Insect-Resistant Eggplant Partnership. So you would say, so okay, she works on wheat, and now she's talking about eggplant. So how can she do this? Or what is the commonality? The commonality is there's amazing technology and knowledge out there. And we want to make sure that that knowledge, technology, and the products, the result of that, those varieties, reach the farmers and the consumers. And that's my goal in life right now as the scientist in this stage of my career. It's not about doing basic science or science in the laboratory. It's making sure that all the science that you are producing and that is being developed over the decades reaches the field, reaches consumer, because we do not want to spend a lot of money, millions of dollars sometimes, to produce a paper, a book, get tenure. That's not the goal. The goal is investing in science to improve the livelihood of people. And we do that through evidence-based data, decision-making, policy-making, and by making sure that the technology and the science really fits the different locations. Who is our beneficiary? Where is it needed? So through the Feed the Future Eggplant Partnership, Insect-Resistant Eggplant Partnership, we make sure that agricultural innovation are accessible to farmers and the consumers. This project develops and delivers eggplant, BT eggplant for Bangladesh and the Philippines. And it's on the third phase of funding. So it is started because eggplant is severely damaged by the fruit and shoot borer. And FSB causing severe yield losses. Farmers on average spray insecticides every other day, or like up to 100 times in one season. And this is in Bangladesh. So imagine, again, a farmer that to be able to get the crop that they need and want to sell it in the market and to consume it, have to spray this much harmful chemicals. So we had a technology that existed in the world, that is the Cryo-1AC gene from Bacillus thuringiensis, the soil bacteria, that when this gene is present in the eggplant, it renders eggplant resistant to FSB. So a private company, Mexico, had developed this BT eggplant that is genetically improved eggplant with the event, what is called EE1, by inserting this Cryo-1C gene. So by producing this protein, then the eggplant is resistant, is protected. So what our project did was access that technology from Mexico so that it was licensed to the government of Bangladesh for free, so that they can develop varieties, Bangladesh developed varieties with the Cryo-1C gene. So that would allow to have local preferred varieties and hybrids in Bangladesh and later on in the Philippines with the Cryo-1C, so that we can reduce significantly the level of insecticide that was needed to produce the crop. So what are the results of this investment? And this is when it gets super exciting. This is what really gets me today. It's seeing the proven technology, the scientifically developed technology, and evidence backs it up, that this technology now reduces the infestations of FSB in BT eggplant compared to non-BT eggplant by 45%. you will see it in non-BT versus negligible infestations in BT eggplant. Farmers are seeing a 61% saving on pesticide costs compared to non-BT farmers. 61% reduction in cost of production. That results in 6 times increase in farmers' net returns compared to non-BT eggplant farmers, and 21% increase in gross revenue, 19.6 higher fruit yield by planting BT eggplant, and 41% reduction toxicity of pesticides applied, measured by the pesticide use toxicity score. So what is not to love? You know, it's technology that is proven and now in the hands of farmers. How many farmers? We have seen a huge increase in adoption since 2013 and 14, when 20 farmers received the first seeds of the Bangladesh developed BT eggplant varieties. And in the 2020-2021 season, we have over 65,000 farmers growing BT eggplant based on the number of seed that was distributed in the country. So we have seen the area under BT eggplant cultivation has increased significantly over the years. And now it's to the point that we say, okay, when we talk to farmers, they that are growing this technology and know about that technology, they say, I want more varieties with this technology because I grow a lot more varieties than the ones that you have access, that I have access in the market from you. So we're in a really good point where now we have the capacity to develop new varieties for farmers to really achieve that demand that exists in the market of market preferred varieties that have that BT resistance. And we are able to do this by collaborating with key stakeholders in Bangladesh. And as you can see here, we are not only working with research institutions, we work with the Department of Extension, with Farming Future Bangladesh for communication. We work with Mahiko for technology access. We work with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Environment. We work with private sector companies in Bangladesh so that they start learning more about that technology and decide if they have a potential opportunity for investment in this technology so that they can make more varieties available, because there's that much that we can do within the boundaries of our projects and the institutions that we work with. But the private sector is much better set up for multiplying seed by using their delivery system for seed access by farmers. They have the networks. They have also the capacity to produce hybrids and produce varieties that many more than the institutions that we work with, because we are working mostly with research and extension institutions that have many other demands and mandates. And of course, we work with the Bangladesh Agricultural Development Corporation for seed production, distribution, and enhancing adoption of that technology. So like you can see, our projects involve many stakeholders, different countries, so that we can have different results. So we don't base on one single objective. We look across the value chain and say, where are the interventions? What do we need so there we can increase adoption and accessibility of this technology, again, to increase productivity, sustainability, and nutrition for all. So right now we are working on scaling up BT eggplant adoption by providing additional agronomic traits to varieties that are in development, so like wilt tolerance and wider adaptation to agrological zones. Now that the farmers know about it, many more wants to grow it, but the varieties that we have limitation in terms of adaptability. So we're developing new varieties that will be more adaptable to some of these areas. To protect the technology and for sustainability purposes of the technology, we're developing a next generation of BT eggplant hybrids that will have 2 genes instead of just the CRY1C gene, so that again, we put less selection pressure on the insect so that the technology is more durable. we're developing of a more inclusive and responsive BT eggplant value chain. Again, that gender capacity building, enhancing its stewardship, outreach education, policy advocacy, and enforcement of safeguard BT technology. We're also improving the enabling environment. So this means working with the regulatory system in Bangladesh and the Philippines to have a more predictable and efficient system, so that technology that is developed can still be rigorously tested for safety, but also that we take into consideration the impact of that and the characteristic. What are the benefits of this technology, and using evidence-based decision-making processes that then we can achieve that development of the product and adoption. And then we also hope to support commercialization of these varieties that were recently approved in the Philippines. So in Bangladesh, we have multiple activities like seed production, variety selection trials, technology promotion through commercial nurseries in multiple locations, demonstration trials on farm, and then women-led nurseries. So you can see, again, we're taking a holistic approach. So you're seeing a trend. We take holistic approach across the value chain about the different stakeholders and involve all of them in the process, because agricultural food system is more than agricultural production. No, it's distribution, it's variety selection, it's market, there's so many aspects. So we are in the process of developing these two varieties that would allow, again, for wider adoption and more market availability for BT eggplant in Bangladesh. We're working with commercial nurseries to really reach out to more farmers. In Bangladesh, as in many countries, farmers go to seedling nurseries to buy their vegetable seedlings so that they can plant on time. They don't waste the time. They ensure germination and the same, more uniform. So now we're providing seed to nurseries so that they can produce the seedlings of the eggplant, in addition to farmers accessing seed directly. So that way we look at different avenues, making it more common practices like for other crops. So that way people have access. And this is one of the dear to my heart activities where we're working with women that had nurseries or that were interested in developing vegetable nurseries. And then we have provided them with the training, but also the infrastructure so they can start a nursery. So this will not only increase the adoption of BT eggplant, but also creates understanding about that technology, and also provides a new way for funds in the household, an income for this woman. It provides a new source of income that can be used to supplement the current income. It provides more independence. It can allow for more discretionary expenses. And so we're really excited to see this new, has been less than a year since we released, but we already seen the first cycle results and the engagement and how excited these women are, and looking at their entrepreneurship abilities. It's really, really exciting. So we look forward to do more of that. And this is the third case study, just to kind of bring things together. So a few years ago in 2020, we did a study on climate resilient agricultural adoption of crops, and what were the different determinants that will lead to adoption of climate resilient crops. So as a scientist, we always think about, oh, you know, as a breeder, as a plant pathologist, oh, it needs to have disease resistant, or it needs to have the yield, or it needs to have that quality. And yes, those are all true. But when we look at what are the determinants of adoption of climate resilient crops, the majority of the literature suggested that the availability and effectiveness of extension services and outreach was key for adoption of climate resilient crops, something that a lot of times we don't think about as scientists. They're like, okay, I developed the right variety, but now what? If the extension services and outreach is doesn't happen or is effective, that technology will not be adopted, no matter how good it is. It also, it was impacted by the education level of the household, because again, the capacity to understand the new technology and the adoption and the implications. But again, it doesn't have to be formal education. It's more about that willingness and that understanding of the technology and how we make it accessible to them. Farmers' access to inputs, especially seeds and fertilizer. Of course, if you don't have access to the inputs, how are you really going to adopt these technologies? And then the socioeconomic status of farming families, social differences such as sex, age, and marital status and ethnicity affected also the adoption of varieties. So why do I bring this to you? Because it's really interesting to know that our science is extremely necessary, but it's incomplete. It's not sufficient to get that full benefit, that impact in farmers' fields and for the consumer. So we need to think differently about how we engage in science and how do we design our science. So a couple of take-up messages from this study, it was that for adoption of climate resilient crops, we needed to take part of a whole farm or climate smart agriculture strategy. So again, adopting those varieties or crops, it will happen more if we take a whole farm approach. If national policies are in place to support farmers' access to other assets and services such as education, land, finance services, and diverse income earning opportunities, there's more chances for adoption of climate resilient crops. Also, it is important to know that farmers will not adopt these crops solely based on the environmental adaptation qualities. So not because it's just drought tolerant, they're going to accept that, or because it's heat tolerant. They will accept that if it's considered, that breeding program consider the whole farmer and market trait preferences. So we need to understand that those traits that we care for are placed in the right varieties for the right locations. Are these varieties market preferred? So this is really interesting because we know how long it takes to develop varieties, sometimes 10 years to develop a varieties and up to 20 years sometimes for truly adopting a variety, traditional varieties. So if we're going to develop something for the markets, like how do I know what the market is going to look like 10 years down the road? This is why we need to, again, do our research properly, but also expedite the process of selection, expedite the process of release of variety, expedite the process for testing and deregulating some of these traits or technologies. Because if we wait 20 years, the crop, the variety, the trait may be not as relevant anymore. So, and then all those years of research are wasted. And also tell us that the breeding cycles are continuous. The breeding programs need to continue to evolve every single year. We need to continue to put new material there to stay relevant. And again, the building resilience requires a cropping system and more often a farming systems approach. So it needs to fit with the cropping system, and that a multiple interventions approach is needed. So again, you see some of these trends that I've been mentioning before. So we get more and more data that suggests that we need to consider this more holistic, more inclusive network of research to be able to accomplish our goals, that is to improve livelihoods through agriculture. So all that said, so how are we going to leverage that hyper-connected world, that connectivity that we have? Remember that we talk about bringing back this community. So you have seen through the projects that I presented that we reach out to people all over the place, that we were sharing data, that we were uploading data right away, the early warning system, collecting data near real time, sending it to the UK. The UK then generates the forecast, sends us back to Ethiopia. But it's this cycle of connectivity, people flying and going to training, going to the international nurseries. So there is a lot of connectivity. By the way, all the publication of our projects are in open access. So how do we take advantage of this hyper-connected world? How we leverage that? So first of all, think about this. Over 65% of the world population has access to the internet. Look at what we're doing today. We have people from all over the world. So think about that when you're developing your projects and your research. You can reach out to people by SMS, WhatsApp. You can use citizen science to get information from the field. You can do near real-time data collection or real-time data collection and uploading for rapid analysis. Like I mentioned, open access literature, not only publish open access so more people learn about your research, but also you can access now so much more than you were a few years ago. You have access to all the research from the world. Take advantage of that. And then access that global expertise. Provide your expertise to others, make it available. Also, look for it, receive that knowledge. I'm here to talk to you today. You can reach out to me via LinkedIn, via Twitter, via Facebook, by email. Having these conversations, join those webinars, know what's happening in the world. So as a scientist, this is how you leverage that hyper-connected world. I want to give you an example that doesn't come from agriculture, just to show you how exciting this is. So in May of 12, just a couple of weeks ago, in Nebraska, there was a tornado. And then there was this group of scientists that were looking at, they are a storm chaser. And they have this vehicle that can get inside tornadoes and collect data. So they were getting ready for this tornado that it was coming, and they just needed to be placed. You see them here, like just in the path of the tornado. And it has been very, very difficult to get inside. But for the first time, this vehicle with the scientists inside were able to get straight inside a tornado. And they are sending this live out there to the world through their channel, YouTube channel. Everybody that is subscribed to the channel can watch this happening. But not only can watch this happening, the scientists start collecting data right away after the tornado. All the data is just being collected by the machines and the equipment, and they start analyzing it right away. And what they do is something revolutionary. They start collecting the data and they start putting it right away online. Why? Because they wanted the scientists that were in their community around the world to start chiming in, being able to say, oh, what's that? This is what that means. When they had a question, they can reach out to these experts and people that are even outside of the area of expertise, but have all the knowledge, passion for the science. One thing that happened is their anemometer broke down. So they couldn't determine the full speed of that tornado. They can estimate based on other factors, but they couldn't tell. So they posted that online, and immediately they start getting answers. So somebody right away from the community online was able to get on, do the math, and tell them what was the speed of the tornado based on the data that was shared. So this is like super quick. And if you go to their website, that I highly recommend to subscribe to their site, you can see that they have been waiting all their career for a moment like this. So in the old school of science, what the scientists would have done, protect that data, no? So like, oh no, I don't want anybody to know because I want to be the first one on publishing this. And these scientists, it's totally the opposite. They publish it for everybody to see, to chime in, and to help them understand everything they're seeing. So they accept that there's knowledge out there, that the people are interested and willing to support the science. So I just show you this because we have examples like this too in agriculture, but I thought this was so unique because I can tell these people by the videos, everything, they have been waiting for this for so long. And it was such an exciting moment, and they decided to share it with all of us. So anyway, that's an example of the power of leveraging science in the hyperconnectivity. So as a scientist today, how do you get the most out of the hyperconnectivity? How do you lead in an environment like this? How do you get the most? In addition to be a smart scientist, that if you're here today, you already know how to do science, you need to engage in public and political conversations. Why? Because we need more people, the public, to understand science and trust science. So share the facts. Not only you're going to help the rest of the scientific community by sharing, your data, your knowledge, so people do not repeat or can build on what you're doing and, help you maybe get to the next stage, but also really as a service to our community. If people know a scientist, they are more willing to trust science in general because they trust you. So you, by being a leader in your community, you're building this trust. So learn to communicate science to non-scientists, engage in media. If somebody wants to interview you, show up, but also do your research, do your understanding of what is my audience? What do they care about? What kind of knowledge they're going to have of my science? What kind of jargon should I avoid? How can I make it more personal? So engage, but prepare for that. Be an influencer. You have the capacity to influence and promote behavioral changes in science by modeling best practices. And what does that mean? Publish in open access, publish your data, share your data early and on, but in a responsible way. When we talk about sharing data, we also want to make sure that we understand the impact of sharing that data. Is the data incomplete? Is the knowledge incomplete? What are the assumptions? Does it has political and economical implications? How do I prevent a negative feedback if my data is not complete? So make sure that you put those boundaries, that you set up things, and you actually base your comments based on the science and not your opinions. So remember, early sharing, extremely important. Share your preprints of your paper. While the peer review is going, share your paper out there. Finish your thesis, publish it online in pre-press or preprint. Why? Because there's feedback that can benefit and make you a better scientist and improve your science. Maybe somebody knows a statistical method that you haven't explored yet, or has a software that can help you. So change it, influence behavioral changes in science, like sharing by modeling, and develop and strengthen inclusive collaboration. And inclusive collaboration, that means think outside your traditional network. Do not continue to do work just with the same 3 or 4 people. Look at early career scientists from different institutions, from different countries, with different perspective, different gender. So that way you have the most diverse collaborators. Again, study after study shows that diverse teams are more productive. So finally, let's go into the call to action. So through my presentation, you have seen multiple trends, but I think they can be summarized into these 3 major concepts. Global challenges require global perspectives for global solutions. And we know that the world is facing some really, really big global challenges. So we need to have this global perspective to be able to achieve these global solutions. Begin with the why and the end in mind. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that means, but in general, think about when you develop that proposal, when you're developing that research opportunity, who benefits? Why is this relevant? How is this different? Where is it more important? So ask yourself those questions. Think about what is going to be the impact of this. What is going to be that press release? What is the headline that I'm looking for? And if you start with that, you will decide better what your method is going to be like and who you need at the table, who you need in that team. So begin with the why and the end in mind. And again, responsible, open data, on-time sharing of ideas and results. So let's start with the global challenges. It's kind of summarizing what we saw today. Take a system approach, a holistic approach to research and development. From the discovery, application, education, and behavioral changes, take all of that into account. The only thing like, oh, I'm curious about is I wonder, and then go ahead and do the research. Now, think about, how do I take a system approach? What am I missing? What I'm not considering? Then look at the collaborations, make them purposeful. Look for people that have same goals or that can get to the goal once you explain it, and that share your values or can get there, or at least they don't go against your values, because it will be very difficult if you have an end game in mind and this person has, or this institution has, a completely different approach because they have a different goal or agenda. Let's use the peer-to-peer learning approach. Let's share, let's learn more by, again, sharing data, sharing information early on. But don't think that the conversation is a one-way. You are the expert and you're receiving and you're giving away information and somebody else is receiving, or you're here just to learn from me. No, it's a two-way conversation. I come into collaborations thinking I'm going to learn as much as I'm going to teach, or I know very little about this, but I'm willing to learn and use my expertise to apply to this, and then I'm going to be learning a lot during the process. And then have very inclusive collaborations. Think global, but act locally. So we have heard a lot of that. I have kind of also a different approach. When you act globally and you have this large collaboration, think of the local impact, not only in your institution or country, but for them, the other collaborators. Does it fit with the values, with the culture, with the goals of their institution, their country? Does it fit? So it's not a destructive relationship, or it's something that will only benefit you. What is the data of UG99? How is it going to be used? Is it going just to protect my wheat here, or by having the data, I can help there? So that's kind of the approach. Think global, act local, but also act global, think local impact. In terms of beginning with the why and the end in mind, again, why is this urgent? Why is this so important that if I told a donor of a funding institution, they will get it? What is the cost of not acting today? Remember, think about COVID-19. What if we would have invested early on surveillance systems that were really, and people were sharing data, and we had in place, how to respond to emergency? The cost would have been a lot less in terms of people's life, time, money, etc. So why is this urgent? What is the cost of not acting today? Adoption of Bt eggplant. What is the cost of not acting today? More insecticide, more toxic insecticides going to the field, more people spraying insecticides. So what is the cost of not acting today? Where is it needed? Is it locally or globally, regionally? What is the impact? Who is the beneficiary? What is the impact? What is the legacy of this work? How is this story going to be remembered? Again, what is the press release? What is the title of that news item? How is that op-ed going to look like? Think about that. What is your community is going to say? Oh, as a scientist, you did X, Y, and Z. What a great career, the impact in the field. So having that legacy in mind keeps you in check about, does it matter? Should I be concerned if I have a failure of this or it doesn't get funded? Do I put a proposal again? Is it that important to me? So let's continue to polish it. Let me bring new people into the team. So when you think with the end in mind and with the why, you will have a better understanding of where your science can go and how to get there. And again, responsible, open data, and on-time sharing of ideas. Leverage expertise. Do not shy away from the criticism. Criticism in science is good. It really tests our assumptions. It challenges what we think in a safe environment. Create a safe environment for challenging expectations and assumptions. Bring in voices and ideas. Break down the silos. Why? Because if we keep talking to each other that knows our topic, we don't see the blind spot. We don't know what we're missing. But when we start talking outside, then they say, oh, have you considered X? Or explain me why you think that's the way it should be. And why you have to explain that and think about your research in a different way. You'll be like, wow, how did I miss that? So breaking those silos, bring that really awareness of the big vision of our science, and expand your network of influence in research. By sharing, people will be more willing to share with you. By sharing your data early on, again, you can influence the next level of research. You can start modeling those practices. And also people will notice what work you're doing. They may be willing the next time they need somebody with your expertise, they will call you. But if you are not out there and you're not sharing and participating in the conversation, how do people will find you? So we need to expand our network of influence in research by being present and sharing and engaging. And to me, if you were to work on that, again, if you're already a scientist, you know the scientific method, you know how to do science, but how do we get the most of the science with the most impact? And with that, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today, for listening to me, for being excited and interested in the topic. I'm giving you here the information of the projects that I have right now, and also of my profile at Cornell, so you can find me, my email address and contact information. You can always find me in the BGRI community, and also in the Insect Resistant Eggplant Partnership, and now a new project that I have with the University of Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico is where I was born. For me to give back, I'm engaging with the university in curriculum development and engaging with early career scientists, providing opportunities so they can learn about sustainable management of agricultural systems. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm happy to take all the questions that you may have and comments and feedback. Thanks.
No, thanks. We are right now in the tornado, between the tornado, within the tornado about your informations and your way of presenting. Lots of things today we'll learn from you, not only the sides, the passion about your work, also presentation skill, slide preparations. Everybody is, I think, loved. They are giving you many love signs, many appreciations in YouTube, and I'm basically very motivated today because I did my PhD in BT jute. Jute is a fiber crops. India and Bangladesh are the main producer of that, and also China is producing. So that time I use a fusion protein, Cry1 AB and AC. And I did it because I thought in India, BT cotton is commercially available. So maybe one day it will be available. Otherwise, I try to go in these directions that I can one day take the some positions to make it available in India or like others crops. So BT is very close to me because I lot of time doing that during my PhD. It is really fascinating for us that Bangladesh is going to test it and going to producing successfully last few years, and just started in Philippines also, because it also give us some enthu or motivation as an Indian.
Yes.
That if our country is neighboring countries are going to produce, then you can't stop this technology. Somehow it's come to the country in a proper channel or in an illegal channel, but it can it will be appear in India very soon. So it's better that we can make a policy to accept in formally. Otherwise, for my perspective, farmers are very clever and very smart because they are not going to lose anything in that during this
That's
policy
exactly
making.
it. That's
Yes.
exactly it. Like I said, like something, if when I talk to farmers, and that's what I do, I hear all the noises out there about, oh, people do not like GMOs. I'm like, I go and talk to the farmer and I say, okay, you are my customer. My real customer is, are you benefiting? Do you like it? Do you have it? And they say, no, like bring me more varieties because, I'm getting a good price in the market, but, it's not in all the preferred varieties. But, in Bangladesh, they grow like up to 100 different kind of brinjal. So how can I'm going to cover all of them? So it's just listening to the farmer. The farmer is risk averse. They will try something, but they will not stick with it if they don't like it. They are very smart and they learn from each other. So work with the farmers, understand their behavior, and we can get this technology to the field, and then the policymakers will have to listen because it's their farmer, it's their food security.
Because if the top is the bottom is ready, then what there is no point to hold it, or not the point of the just make it available, because in Bangladesh it's successfully grown, and it's such a it's a not only example for worldwide, it's a very good example for any Asian countries, that we should focus these two countries, mainly Bangladesh and Philippines. In golden rice, they are in Philippines. It's also accepting. So it's and thanks to Cornell and like your vision, because without you and like your people like you, if they are not interested in these sectors or these countries, then it's very hard to start. So I appreciate your work. I understand it's lot of criticism are there, lots of red tapes are there, lots of are there, because in Bioingene we're trying to focus. One thing is also in soft skills, so we learn many soft skills. Also, we are focusing in the ethics. What you shown in tornado paper, they are acknowledged. They are acknowledged that the someone in YouTube, they help them to understand the speed of tornado. So it's a lesson from many things we are learned, and also we are going to know many more from your personal journey. I request Priyanka, and we already collected 5-6 questions. Obviously, more questions are GMO is good or bad is understandable. But yes, we got many questions. It's related to not only your this talk, also related to how they can join your lab, how they can interact to you, how they can get you as a PhD supervisor. So is lots of interest, not only your topic, also on you. So
That's great. That's great.
So I asked Priyanka. Please, Priyanka, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I would like to move ahead for the interactive session. So the journey of Professor Acevedo. So Professor Acevedo, your journey and career path are truly inspiring for young women researchers. Our audience is eager to hear about your experiences and the steps you took to achieve your current position. Would you be kind enough to share your story with us?
Thank you. And I love telling the story because it's a story of so many other women in science and early career scientists. So I've loved science since I was a kid. I've been extremely curious, any kind of science. So my dad is a farmer and an agronomist, and he talked to me about the farm, but he also talked to me about the planets and the weather. I knew about tornadoes since I was a kid and hail damage, about drought, about El Nino effect since I was a little kid. So I've been very, very engaged in science, but I decided to go for biology. Biosciences was the area that I was fascinated with, the diversity, the how amazing plants are that produce all this energy and for us to consume. And so I was fascinated. So when I went to college, I went for a biology degree thinking that I was going to do medicine. And then I took botany and genetics on the same semester. I'm like, no, this is what we're doing. And then so I decided to go then for a master's in crop improvement. And I was doing my master in crop improvement for disease resistance, actually. I realized that how can I do crop improvement if I don't understand the pathogen? So then I did a PhD in plant pathology to understand both sides of the story. So that's at that point, it was a very unique kind of career path because I can talk to breeders, I can talk to pathologists. I was in the intersection and do that. So I train my students that way too. So they knew about plant breeding, they knew genetics, they do take courses in statistics. So take those statistic classes, get a certificate in statistics if you can, because it's the common language now of biosciences. And then when I did my tenure position at North Dakota State University, I was very lucky to get a position in a department that was highly supported by the farmers. The North Dakota Wheat Commission supported my position, provided funding for my research. So I was really proud of doing research that was impactful for them. During my, going back for a minute, during my PhD and my postdoc, it was my first exposure to international agriculture, and I fell in love. For my PhD, I went to Honduras, working on wild beans in Honduras, seeing what the farmers were growing and the diseases that were associated with it. And then working on UG99 with the USDA, going to that platform, that phenotypic platform in Kenya, to really look at the diversity. So I knew I wanted to do international agriculture, and I wanted to do in response to farmers' needs. So that led me to come to Cornell. And when I joined Cornell, I was able to then take this leadership role, where now I didn't have my own research laboratory. My laboratory was out there in the world. I would go to different places, work with the scientists, help them get the technology, help them even with, how to do DNA extraction, how to do race analysis, how to collect data, set up fields. So I was able to do exactly what I was doing with a much larger lab that it was the world. And so I was very lucky. And the same thing with BT eggplant. I am not the scientist on the ground. The technology has been developed. The scientists at Barty have the knowledge they need, but I support them. I provide new collaborations. I bring new expertise. And then I'm in the outskirts of all the intersections with the different stakeholders. And that, to me, brings me a lot of joy, because I'm able to support scientists, do what they do best, that is the science. And then I say, give me that science, let's take it to the world. And let me remove some of those barriers. So that's what I hope to do, and encourage other scientists to do the same.
That's really very inspiring. And somehow listening to your stories, I can recall the Dr. Borlaug story. He was also a pathologist and doing the same job like you. So somehow you're following the footsteps of Dr. Borlaug.
I hope so.
So following the next question, which is you already mentioned that you are dealing with a lot of administrative responsibilities and management. So considering your position, how do you successfully handle the demand of the administrative responsibilities and also the research work?
The quick answer is hiring good people in my team, having a diverse team, making sure that I am surrounded with great minds. It makes it all happen. If I have a good communication person, a good lab person, a good data analyst, a good support person that can help me keep track of everything I do, like hiring good people. But to hire good people, first you have to inspire them in terms of, why are we doing this? Why is it so important that we get this right? People will go the extra mile for you if you inspire them and they trust you and they know that you care for them. And to me, that's essential. Having a strong team, supporting them, making sure that they know what the expectations are, but also that our values merge. Like, why are we doing this? If I can communicate this, like, farmers need this, the world needs this, they will come every day and do the work, even if it's boring or it's just hectic. But if they know what the goal is, I think it makes it a lot easier. But again, having a good team and prioritizing. Remember, when you're having too much to do, or can you take another assignment, think about, how is that going to further the goal? How does this fit my values? If it doesn't fit your values or your goals, find a polite way to decline. Find a way, but also say yes a lot. Say yes to opportunities, like me here. Like, I could be doing something else, but to me, being here with you, talking to all of you, it meant a lot. I'm like, I'm not going to shy away from that. I will make it happen, no matter what it takes. So being able to say yes, yeah, when it matters.
So what is more difficult, managing people or doing research work simultaneously?
I think people have different expectations, to make sure that we are all in the same, I always joke that I work with plants because I don't talk back, but it is the interaction with humans. It's energizing, but it makes you stop and think about it. So managing people is a skill that we all need to develop, and it doesn't come natural necessarily. You have to work at, because your style may be not somebody's like. So invest time on leadership training, on understanding how to lead, how to be a leader, how to listen, when to say no. It's important that we develop those skills as much as our science. So take those professional courses, professional development courses.
And in your position, when you are dealing with international cultural, many cultural different people, so sometimes cultural hurdles are there as well.
Yes,
So,
and we need to learn, and that's like, do your homework, understand who you're working with, who your audience, what is appropriate, not appropriate in a country. That sometimes you get an email and it may look rough, like they're demanding. It's like, no, it's cultural. Don't take it personal. It's it doesn't have enough pleases in it, or like we all talk differently, so we need to understand our culture and not take things so personal.
that's really good advice. So following up, the question is considering the availability of various medical supplements, how significant is the role of biofortified crops in addressing the malnutrition?
That's a great question. And I know where you're coming from, because there's that question, do we need fortified food? Do we need vaccines or nutrients, additional nutrients in our food through gene editing or GMOs? And the answer is there is a role for them, because it's all about availability and accessibility. We have been fortifying food forever. Our salt is fortified with iron. Our flour, processed flour, is fortified with nutrients. So we're talking about how you make it more accessible to more people at the right price every day without having to think about. And also think about it, the fact that buying supplements, yes, it's accessible. We, in the developed world and in developing countries now, people are accessing those, but it's one more product than you need to purchase, think about, but also that's for sustainability purposes. It's something that needs to be produced, processed, packed, shipped, sell to you. So, and bottle. So what if the food that we eat is all we need, that it has it here? And many people do not have access to processed food, or do not have, if they have to decide between buying food and buying a supplement, let them buy the food that has the supplement in it. So to me, there is a huge role for technology to support more nutrients and more nutritional intake in vitamins, in minerals, micronutrients in our food, traditionally or with new technologies.
So somewhere you said the accessibility and acceptability. So acceptability is a major concern in terms of also the accessibility. I mean, so both, what percentage you would like to divide in accessibility and acceptability? Or also it is like country wise. I mean, developing countries has a more hurdle to accept, or maybe not available for them as well. The supplement is easily, they can have it. So what is your take in that?
So to me, I meant availability and accessibility. But in terms of acceptability, what we think about is a lot of time it has to do with lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of science-based evidence of what it is. For example, I don't question iron in my salt because I know I need iron. So I take iodized salt. I trust it that I need iron. I'll take it with it. So I use it. Same thing. If I can get my niacin and my other vitamins in my flour, I'll take it. So then I don't have to take a vitamin. So a lot of times when you take a vitamin, you cannot absorb all the nutrients that you're supposedly getting. Why? Because it's not balanced. It's not accessible to you. With food, you have a much better balance. You can absorb it better. So explaining that to the community, to the public, saying, okay, this is why if your food is more nutritious, you're getting all the vitamins and nutrients from your food in a way that is the body can utilize it. And so explaining the science behind it in a way that the people can understand it and that can remove some of that misinformation.
Yeah. So there is a big difference between the misinformation and misinformation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you talk a lot about the digital agriculture. So what is your perspective on digital agriculture and its implications?
I'm super excited. I'm super excited about what digital agriculture is doing and will do. We're not there yet, but imagine the capacity of early detection of diseases or breaking down complex traits into different components. being able to understand why the angle of a root needs to be this way, and we can select it for, or how to develop the perfect plant in terms of its height, the angle of the leaves. We have seen with the Green Revolution what was possible to do when you change the physiology of the plant. So we make it short. So if we can understand better that what we do with the naked eye, why not? And it will be fascinating. We have the satellites, but also think about that there's the root system. It's so difficult to study, and now sensors can do that. So we're getting a lot more information. Now is how do we process that information so for decision making? But I think that at a smallholder farmer that has little capacity in terms of access to labor, and that has little access to input or economic access, being able to precision agricultural their field so that they know when to apply the fertilizer, where to apply it, how much of it, like this area doesn't need it, only this area, or irrigate only this area, in that let's say our irrigation system can know that. It would save resources, time, and effort. So I hope that we can develop not only for the big agriculture, but also for the smallholder agricultural systems. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, it is bringing a huge change in terms of agriculture once the farmer accept that technology, digital agriculture.
And we need to make it accessible. The more that we develop it and that we use it and more people are involved, the lower the cost is going to be eventually, and the more accessibility we will have.
Yeah, nowadays even the mobile applications are available for many of the traits.
Exactly. You can do so much with your phone. You can detect diseases. You can look at the weather. You can look at, again, the forecast, the early warning systems. You can hook up sensors to your phone. And share it. It's really cool. Yeah.
So moving on to next question, what is your viewpoint regarding the acceptance of BT crop in developing countries? And there are so many questions from the audience as well for that. So maybe you will be covering a lot here.
Yeah. So BT, again, is one of those traits that, to me, we should not even have to discuss it anymore in terms of acceptability. It is a win-win situation. It's a win for the farmer, it's a win for the environment, and it's a win for the consumer. We're talking about that insecticides, for the most part, are highly toxic. They cost a lot, and pests develop resistance to them. A lot of times, our farmers do not wear the protective gear necessary. So they're exposed to them. Some of these insecticides are neurotoxins. They really toxic. So BT, if it's spray, is organic. If it's in the plant, it's considered genetically modified. Let's assume it's a trait. We can use bioinsecticides to protect our crops, our environment, and humans. Why not? So to me, BT is one of those traits that we should stop thinking about the process, but thinking about the end game, the impact, the positive impact that it has. Insecticides a lot of time kill all the beneficial pests. They impact the soil and our water. BT is very specific, very well tested. It's one of the proteins like most studied, if not the most studied in the world. For decades we have studied it. We know it's safe, and it's very specific. It destroys when you cook the food, so it's not there even long. Even if you were concerned about that, we know it's safe. It had been tested and tested and tested. And again, the benefits are so huge that we should just say it's about the impact of this wonderful technology.
Yeah, maybe it's still like we are struggling since long to have acceptance for the BT crops, and now people seriously need to think about that. It's not like it's always a win-win situation, as you said.
Yeah.
So
and that we have shown with BT eggplant that it doesn't have to be big ag products, that it can be accessible to farmers. It can be in varieties, it can be in hybrids. Farmers buy hybrids all the time because they understand the value of like hybrid maize, for example. So if they can see value, they will pay for that technology if necessary. We need to show them the value. And so to me, like I said, farmers are loving it, and the consumer, if you say it has less pesticide, if this is the end game, the consumer will take it. And then we have shown over and over again that it's safe. So I think it's about removing misinformation, presenting the data in a way that the people can understand it and that had impact for them. And so I think if you tell anybody, do you want to eat fruits with insecticides or without it? And then, because even when we use some of the more organic material, you're still applying chemicals. So it's about that, understanding really what is behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So what are your thoughts on the involvement and contribution of women in the field of agriculture? Everybody knows, whosoever familiar with you, the BGRI and Women in Triticum and Women in Science. So what are your thoughts in that?
And again, I think it's about an inclusive system where all the voices are heard, are considered equal at the table, so that we can have the best solutions. We cannot find solutions if we exclude people, or if we do not, we underestimate their knowledge, their value, their capacity. So to me, it's about breaking the barriers for women to enter, providing opportunity for women, whatever it is, like working with the women-led nurseries, is wherever they at in their roles, like, how can I support you? Because if you have more income and you have more knowledge, you can better serve your family. And if your children then have a better life because you are working or getting additional income, they can get a tutor, they can go to dance classes, they can, go to school, they can buy new shoes, whatever it is, take a vacation. That opens our world to the possibilities. So to me, in that sense, it's making it more inclusive, removing barriers, but also working with women so to remove some of that misconceptions. Because we have been told so many times that we are not capable of doing, that we should not be leading, that it will interfere with our life or our family life, and say, let's take it as it is. Let's evaluate it scientifically with data, and let's see what we can do. So because you're able, you're capable. So how do we change the mindsets? So of growth, of really engaging and say, no, you can do this, and I'm here to support you.
So from last 2 decades, I guess you are involved with the Women in Science and Triticum WIT awards and all. So where do you really face the problem? I think from that time to now, we came way yes. So what is where you find the main problem in terms of encouraging the women in agriculture?
I think it's we're seeing a much larger number of women entering leadership roles. That was one of our major goals, because women were doing the science. They were just not able to move up in the system. So providing that leadership training and not even training, it's just because a lot of times they knew what to do. It's empowering that knowledge, but also showing it by example, by pushing the boundaries, selecting more women to my committees, making sure that when there is a conference, I have a balanced number of women, men speaking, also from developing countries and developed countries, early career in more senior positions, like everywhere. I will look for that. So the major challenge is about expectations. Sometimes people assume that there is only one way to lead, and it's the one that we know, mostly done sometimes in a more masculine way. And women lead differently. We're a lot of times more inclusive. We take more time to listen. And so sometimes changing the expectation of how does a woman lead? What are the traits that I bring to the table? Then again, not every woman or not every man lead the same way, but there's an expectation of what leadership looks like. So changing that perspective, I think it has been the most challenging part. What does it look to be a leader in good decision making? Are we benefiting the whole versus a couple? Be more inclusive of voices. So I think it's about that, changing that perspective about how women lead and what leadership looks like.
I'm sure many women are listening this webinar and getting inspired by your thoughts.
I hope so.
So moving to the next question, which areas of plant science research do you expect to experience significant growth and advancement in the near future?
Like, remember, I said, like, I love biology, and I was saying, I think bioscience are going to explode. Synthetic biology. I am thrilled about what synthetic biology is going to do for every aspect of life. Think about it, biofertilizers, understanding microorganisms, designing microorganisms that can help us provide that particular enzyme or that protein, that drug that we're looking for. So synthetic biology for designing better enzymes. We have been working in enzymes in every aspect of our life. So what now we have the capacity to really bioengineer them, design them, and doesn't need to be any fancy, technology. It's really understanding the diversity, what those proteins do, what the enzyme, what are the conditions? Does it need better pH? Does it need lower temperature adaptability? Does it perform well for producing a biofertilizer, a fragrance, a color? How do I get to indigo? How do we do that? So we have the capacity to do that with synthetic biology and bioscience in general. So I'm super at fermentation, like an all science that now is giving all this opportunity, understanding microbiome. To me, I think there will be a lot, even for supplements, we understand better how biology works and reproduce it. Yeah.
That's good. And could you share your strategies for the collaborating with fellow researcher, stakeholder, and partners to advance your goal and achieve desired outcomes? I mean, you are in the position where you are dealing with everyone, stakeholders and researchers, and as you already mentioned, managing the people, different cultural barriers you are dealing. So how to achieve the desired outcomes?
I start by understanding people's motivation a lot of time. What are they looking for? What is their goal? Where their values sit in terms of like, what are they hoping to achieve? A lot of times when we get into these challenges, we don't understand each other in terms of what are our goals, or our goals are not aligned. I'm proposing this science. You think we should be doing X. And if we don't understand what our motivations are, it's very difficult to have a true collaboration. We may be able to work together, but every single time I'm going to try to go in that direction and you're going to try to go in that direction. So if we from the beginning understand goals, expectations, but motivations, what motivates, like, do I want to get tenure, or do I want to publish that paper, or do I want to get the Nobel Prize? Do I want to be able to retire early? Do I want to change from this position to the next one, work in a different institution, leave my country and go work somewhere else? If we understand people's motivation, we can work together. Same thing with the farmer. What is he looking for? With the seed distribution, like, what are your challenges? What will make your job easier? So if I understand that, I find ways to collaborate and find those areas where we can collaborate. So a lot of time it has to do with that. Same thing with students. I need to know what their motivation is. When I hire students, I think about, okay, what do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to work? Where do you see yourself 5-10 years down the road? And if I understand that, I say, okay, I think this project will be better for you, but then take these extra classes so they will help you achieve that. That student probably is going to study more for those classes because it's going to help me get there. So I think understanding people's motivation is really important.
Actually, that is very much the next question associated with the which you already answered a part of it. So apart from the academic qualification, what qualities do you seek in an individual when hiring and selecting the team members?
That's really, really, really good question, because academic, when I've been part of committees, admission committees, and everybody looks great on paper. So how do we decide what are the 3 people that get in to the program? So a lot of times that's what we use, letters of reference and a statement of interest and of research, but also we look at how do they overcome failures. If in the first semester, the grades are all over the place, but the second semester, all the grades are good, you say, oh, forget about first semester, grades are good, because the person learned, maybe had a hard time. So I'm one of those that, grades are not the thing I look the most. I look at growth, potential for learning, excitement about learning, excitement about challenges, because as we know, science is tough. Not everything works. Most things do not work the first time we try it. So to be able to have a successful, let's say, student or postdoc, or even somebody in my team, I know there's going to be a lot of failures involved with the learning process, especially when we are having a new project. How many proposals we're going to submit before we get one, or how many times you need to try that paper publication and getting the reviews from the reviewers that are always like, oh my goodness. If we understand how to learn, that is important to learn, that we have a good spirit and mindset about learning and dealing with failure, we can be successful. So that's one of the traits I look for people that show that they have succeeded, that they're excited about learning, and that when they have failed, they succeeded after all, because, or they changed the course of their life or their experience or their profession, because there's nothing wrong with say, you know what, that wasn't for me, so I'm going in a different direction. So do not shy away in those letters of recommendations or application to show how you have advanced, how you have dealt with failure or with challenges, with problems, and how you overcome those. Because a lot of times that sends the right message of like, you are going to be a successful scientist or leader. Yeah.
As you rightly mentioned, I had that difficulty during my master degree. Many of my friends found like, okay, they are not for the course. I mean, they cannot do science in this way. It's what really frustrating for them, and then they change later on. So also, like if you see, I mean, as you mentioned that on paper, everybody looks good. So in that case, you need to work with them. I mean, so after working, like it is also the challenge, because you need to give the 6 months or 1 year to understand the person.
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with it if it's somebody's coming directly on a paper? So how would you analyze that situation?
I ask a lot of questions. I normally interview people, and you go through, you ask some questions, but also the reference letters are really important. So pick well who writes your reference letter. Not somebody that just has the name or the position, but somebody that actually knows you and can speak about how you deal with pressure, with challenges, with failure, with training others, with people interactions. Somebody that can speak about the person that you are and what makes you unique and what will make you a successful scientist or leader. It's important that we have those letters, but I take the time to interview. So even if you are applying for a position and you get the opportunity for that interview, prepare for that interview so you can showcase why are you different, why are you ready for this opportunity, and showcase that even in your message. It's not about the grades that you got only, because if you make it to this level, yeah, you're pretty smart by now. It takes more than being smart to be a successful scientist.
And there are so many memes are available about the PhD advisor and the student.
Yeah, it's not always rosy, and that's very important when evaluating who you want to work with. It should be a two-way conversation. Ask about the advising style, mentoring style. Are you very hands-off or hands-on? Are you detail-oriented and micromanaging or not? Because you may need somebody that is hands-off because you don't want to be interrupted. You want to be able to learn on your own and then come back and redo it if needed. But the professor needs to be able to do that for you, giving you that space. If the person is a micromanager, you and that person will clash. Same thing. If you know that you're a great scientist and researcher, but you love to procrastinate and you will do it the last hour, and I'm guilty of some of that, then I need an advisor that will be checking on, not all the time, like micromanagement, but it will say, hey, can you give me an update? Can we meet every 2 weeks? Because I need that constant checking in to stay on time, because I will continue to do an experiment 20 times so I feel confident. And the advisor will be able to say, I think you've done enough. Let's look at the data. Or I think it's good enough. Do not have to repeat it. So I need that the feedback to be able to move forward, because I'm too much of a perfectionist and also a procrastinator. It's a weird combination.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, every time when we do the webinar and these kind of questions comes from the audience, so they are getting the good advice how to proceed with the research.
Yeah. And also
So,
I always think that one more thing, that a lot of times for a PhD, it's more important who you work with than the university that you go to. If it's a laboratory that has the knowledge, the funding, the expertise for what you want to do, even if it's at a much smaller university, you will be more successful there because they're focused. You will get your publication, you will get your good training. So forget so much about the big universities for your PhD and more about who are you working with.
yeah, that's really, really true. I mean, yeah, because sometimes you can prosper is better when you will work with a better person rather than it's like two
A
way. It's not
name,
one.
yeah.
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 So moving on to the next question, as an editorial board member for renowned journals, our viewer would greatly appreciate any tip or recommendations you can share to enhance the quality of their manuscripts.
That's a really good question because we want to have more publications from everybody around the world. And a lot of times I take the time when I'm reviewing papers and helping the scientists to really get the paper published, not just to criticize it, making sure that the science is good, but also how can I help? And one of the things I suggest to people is before even starting the experiments, think about that paper. Think that, again, with the end in mind, think about that paper. Where would you like to see this paper published? What are the conditions? What is the methodology that you need to use? So think about writing that paper and say like, okay, materials and methods, how will it look? Will this pass the review process? Will this pass the peer review process? Because most of the time, a paper gets rejected because the methodology wasn't the right one to answer the question that the person started to, that wanted to answer. And that's the major. Everything else is like, oh, minor reviews or major revisions. But being rejected most of the time will be because of methodology. So before even thinking about that research, think about the paper. Okay, what is the methodology? Does it really prove what I wanted to? Does it give me the right data so I can prove that? And if you start with that, with your methodology, that requires reading a lot of the literature, the up-to-date literature, accessing, remember that, hyperconnectivity. Get access to all those open access papers. Reach out to the author. Reach out to the expert. Ask, if there's a particular reason why you use that methodology versus X, Y, and Z, I'm considering doing a similar study, but I'm thinking a different methodology. There's a reason why you didn't use it. Learn about that. So, and then once you have that methodology figured out, then it's much easier, because then once you get that data, it's just like write your figures, because the figures tell the story. And so again, if you get your methodology and your figures standing alone tell the story, voila, you have a great paper. Everything else is fixable, or you can figure it out. Of course, the language barrier sometimes, that it needs to fit in the right journal, but we can all do that. Invest a little bit on copy editing if you can. Ask your institution to provide that support. Share your paper early on with your colleagues, close colleagues, but also remember that preprint that we say it helps building that network. Preprints allows you to share your paper before it's published, even sometimes before it's peer review. And you can learn and make the peer review process much easier because you share it with the community that is willing to criticize it. So go for it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, actually, mostly like the newcomers, they come and they are very result oriented rather than going for the methodology. So it is great advice. They should look for a better methodology and then onto the results.
Mm-hmm.
So moving to the next question, your words of advice for who are new to the science, plant science, our young generation, which you are really working great. So what you would like to tell them?
I think I would say work on something you're passionate about, because it's hard. There will be a lot of exciting days, but a lot of tough days. But if you're passionate about it and you believe on why that science is important, you're able to get up every day and go after it. And to me, you will be pleased also with the people you're working with because they share your passion. So make sure that you select an area of research that is that you're passionate about. And let's say you end in a laboratory that is not quite the perfect fit for your passion. Find your passion within that space. Like, what can I learn that will make me better prepare for the next stage of my life, for the next professional job, for that career that I want. So find the opportunity on everything, but be passionate about your science. Be critical about, but not too critical that will stop you from doing. Allow for errors, allow for perfect. Done is better than perfect sometimes. It's good enough. Don't let the perfection to paralyze you and to scare you. I think a lot of things we can learn. If you look up to all these amazing scientists that exist in the world, they started just like you. Nobody was born knowing everything. Nobody knew geometry when they were born. We learned it. So if we can learn science and math and language, we can learn everything in the world. So we just need to be patient. We don't need to be perfect or the perfect scientist today. We just need to be willing to learn and stick with it.
That's true. Is keep learning.
Yeah, and plant sciences right now is such an amazing area to be in, because we finally have that technology to answer the questions that we've been asking ourselves for a long time, and that we only got this much. Now we can really break it apart with the genomics, how much more affordable and better they are and faster. We can learn so much about who we are, what the plants are, what are those traits, what does it really mean, that trait underneath in that genetic, that I think there's a lot to do. And also the world needs better plant scientists. We need to fit, agriculture needs to fit in a sustainable development agenda. We know we need to continue to feed the world, but we also know that there is a lot of malnutrition and obesity. We need to make sure that we are there to provide the right science, and also that our science need to fit with this food system approach that is not only about to produce it, but where do I store it? How do I get it to market? So as plant scientists, we need to, focus on what we're doing, but also keep in mind this other aspect of our food system.
So holistic approach is very important in terms.
Yeah, at least to have some understanding. You don't need to know it all, but know somebody that can help you with.
We need a team
Yeah.
for that. From your presentation, I personally have this question. Last month, I had one meeting, National Agriculture Producer Data Cooperatives. So in this conference, the major idea was that what are the ethical consideration and the potential risk associated with the hyperconnectivity in agriculture, such as data privacy. You said
yes,
data sharing, but people don't want to share data. So data privacy and the security concern is there. So what is your take in that?
So we need to consider that. There's no question. So we need to look at the implications of the data. But we have, as scientists, we also have a system of reward that prevents a lot of time sharing. And we need to change that incentive. If we are going to say, I need to be the first one on publishing, but do not consider that I may not have in my team all the expertise necessary. And if I'm willing to share my data, I can move much faster and get a lot farther. So changing that mindset about what I can do if I share, if I'm more willing to open data sharing. However, the political and economic implications sometimes with data. So this is where I always kind of say, we need to be responsible. We need to be responsible because what are the implications? But sometimes people have wrong assumptions of the implications. We need to understand that we are hyperconnected. That if I have a pathogen or I have a problem or a seed issue in my country, it becomes an issue for my region. And if our goal is to have a better life for everybody, including ourselves, we need to think, what are the implications of this? So it's not like you need to share the data widely, but with the right people, the decision makers, and say, okay, this is what is happening. This is what I have incomplete data or incomplete information, but this is the warning I'm seeing. Get the experts at the table. But sharing data and sharing opinions is very different. So I'm up to sharing data with a community in a way that can be utilized for others to build into on time. But I'm also very concerned about sharing data, incomplete data or information with my opinions behind it, or making suggestions that I don't have really how to back them up. And we also need to understand that trade is important, that governance is important, that the countries have a right to their data, to their information, but also that, you know, it may have human implications too. And so how do we connect? So people that do not want to share, try to understand why they are not sharing, try to understand if they have valid reasons for not sharing. But then as much as we can within our system is incentivize something different, incentivize that data sharing, those collaborations, say, you know, the more authors in your paper, the better. But also, if you use data from somebody, if somebody sends you data, acknowledge that. It's not an acknowledgement at the bottom of the paper. No, it's authorship. It means if somebody has a contribution in the paper, then there should be an author. That's what I like, that journals now ask for contribution of the authors. That takes two things into account. You can justify or not justify why you should be on the authorship. And second, people that believe that just because they put the money behind and they did nothing with it should be on it, or because they're in the same institution, they are the boss, they should be on a paper. You say, what is the contribution to it? So they need to justify it. So I think it's important both ways, that we are fair and ethical about contributions, sharing of data, and that we respect boundaries about how to go. So it's not an extractive relationship.
So showing the potential value, that is also very
Exactly.
important.
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise, why they will share? So we need to show the value.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the end of the interactive session. So I would like to ask, Shubhu, you would like to go for the audience questions, or I should read them?
You please continue. Please
Okay.
continue. I'm still searching for more questions, but okay, all highlighted are okay. Well, actually, just got a questions from Dr. Shushan Palit. He actually proposed a co-guide to ma'am as a for the research purpose. In India, we have an option of guide and co-guide, means supervisor and co-supervisor.
Okay.
So actually he's proposing a co-supervisor to guide some students. So it's interesting. I'm more interested to live questions. So Priyanka, please go for the question.
I think this Google Sheet can Maricelis can also see that, so she can choose. But I'm going to pose the questions. So
Yeah,
first
go ahead.
question is
So
from,
okay, no problem. I shared the seat also, but you can start with the choosing.
yeah. So the first question from, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the correct name, Atnafu Tesfa. How can agriculture researcher effectively handle the growing volume of data in their field? And what steps can they take to ensure the proper organization of the data?
That is a fascinating question. And so we need better data systems, their organization systems. So that's a big challenge for many laboratories. They don't have the proper software to handle the data. But so you have to think about that before you start your research. How are you going to catalog your data? Where it's going to be stored, how can be retrieved? And a lot of time is that thinking about, again, like when I'm talking about methodologies, how am I going to retrieve the data? How am I going to use it? So there's softwares for that that help you organize your data better, but labeling correctly, and it will be a way to really be able to extract it. But a lot of times what we're finding is that we get so much data. Sorry, I'm connecting my computer here, that I am running out of battery, that the data needs not only to be received or generated, but to be able to access and analyze on time for decision making. So we need to think about between the amount of data that we're getting and decision making. What is the timeline? A lot of time, for example, at CIMIT, they have to use the data right away for the next election cycle. So if the data is not available on time, it cannot be used, because I would just get the data after I already had to plant. So thinking about not only the data that you're getting, but how is it going to be utilized and on time, I think is really important.
And there are so many software, as you said, are available for organizing the data. So one should get aware of those software to
and know somebody that is really good on data management. If you are not a person, find a collaborator that is good, somebody in your institution that knows more about IT and about softwares and about data management skills, so that you have that support, because there's that much that a scientist can do.
That's true. So second question from Ankan Das. In the context of ongoing controversy surrounding GMOs in countries like India, how can BT brinjal serve as a viable and beneficial solution?
Thank you for that question. And what we hope is that by showing by example that farmers and consumers are accepting it, that is a viable option, economically, social, and scientifically, that we can show that people should accept that better, that there's a market for it, that is safe, that has been rigorously tested. So because the science is there, it's more about political will, understanding the benefits, and being able to make decisions based on evidence and science, instead of concerns that are unfounded or are based on misinformation. So what we hope is, by providing evidence that of how it works, that it will serve not only India, but many other countries.
So moving on to next question, Samuel Sasbulim. In the context of crop improvement and the promising potential of biotechnology, many countries, including Uganda, encounter substantial hurdle when it comes to embracing these advancements. How are these challenges being actively addressed and overcome, especially in the era of interconnected or hyperconnected agriculture?
So to me, it's about, again, sharing information, sharing examples of how it's done in other countries. I'm just going to give you an example on the regulatory system. So what we hope is that regulatory systems are more predictable, that are more efficient, but they need to be some guidance of what have other countries done to make it work. We don't want more products staying just on the shelf for 20 years because they become obsolete. So how do we do this? So we need an evidence-based regulatory system. But if every country has to go through the process of learning on their own, what it will take a lot more longer. But if we as a community come together and say, these are the guidance, and come example from different countries, different size of countries, different crops, and people express their challenges, their opportunities. I think if we as a whole community come together and say, hey, there's a pathway forward, I figure it out, let me help you. So if we can share more of examples of what works, I think we can prevent some of those hurdles, especially in developing countries. I am fascinated when I go to many developing countries and find out the efficiencies of the system. For example, in the US, it took forever to get to mobile banking. And then I went to Kenya a decade ago, and mobile banking is a thing. It's just like nobody had a checkbook. So bypassing checkbook, because you learn from the process. And the same thing, cell phones. We had landlines forever. And then many countries bypassed the landlines. They went to cellular, more efficient. LED lights. We don't waste at that time. Many countries didn't waste at that time with incandescent light bulbs. Went to light. So I think the more we share those experiences and examples of what works, more people can, really bypass those hurdles, because there's a case scenario. So publish those scenarios of things that work, so others can really benefit from that.
Yeah, that's true. And as you said, hyper-connected, social media is there, and a lot of
all
examples.
the time. Yes. You can have a short video, a lot of times, even demonstrating it works better than explaining. So make a short video, send a little graphic, showing how it's done or what are the results. point out somebody to your paper, have a webinar like you're doing. That's hyperconnectivity. It's just like we can be everywhere, anytime. We can choose from our sources of information. So if we put really good sources of information, people will find us, and we will remove some of those misinformation channels. So let's continue to connect. Yeah.
That's good. And so another question from Darshana Patra. What are the potential long-term effects that can be traced back to the uses of Bt brinjal genes in the brinjal farming ecosystem and the population of Bangladesh?
So the Bt has been tested for decades. And so far, there's no effects, negative effects. Why? Because we did the science, we did the testing. It's safe. It destroys, like I said, when you cook it. Even if you didn't cook it, it will not affect you because you are not the fruit and shoot border. And then also the benefits are huge. No, from 100 sprays to maybe 1 spray in a season. That is the impact. That is the long-term effect. It's the health benefit to the farmer, to the soil, to the environment. That's what I focus on. There is a ton of information that is showing us that the benefits are long-term, the impacts are going to be beneficial. So that's what the science is telling us. And I think we're going to see, like you have seen it with many diets, fats comes in, but the true reality comes out because it has been tested, no matter what people say. So I think it's about done the testing, and we have done the testing for decades. So that's long-term effect.
Practical applications and testing are the best answer for that, I guess.
Yeah.
The question is from Twitter Trend. Is artificial intelligence considered the central driving force in the field of agriculture? Can artificial intelligence have a negative impact on human being? So these are the question of AI.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert, and I'm going to pretend to be an expert on AI, but from my basic understanding, we're already using it. No, every time we train an algorithm to really detect a pathogen using a picture, every time we do Google searches, every time. So those are examples of AI, no? When we use to train our computer to detect, patterns in our data and all of that. So I just think that we just need to be cautious of how it's used, but I think there's so many benefits because, again, we can identify trends that we haven't seen before. And I think my more concern is about accessibility and privacy. I'm concerned about bypassing the different actors. So we need to make sure that the technology is available, that nobody's left behind. But I think the fact that we can use it for precision agriculture, for early warning systems, for early detection of diseases in water, in soil, for the microbiome. So I think there is a lot of good things. I think we just need to think about the applications and the potential impact of those applications. So I think it's a early stages of that technology, and we need to watch it from the experts and listen to, and also look at the data, understand, look at different sources of information before we make decisions.
So it's the question from Nature Web. In your opinion, which is more preferable, gene insertion or biofertilizers? Additionally, do you believe there are any adverse effects of such approaches on the environment or the nature of food production?
Okay, so the way I look at it, I like targeted approaches. So to me, again, gene editing or transformation that involve a specific section of the genome that we understand, that have studied, that can manage, that can control it. I think the better we can do that, the better, because for example, traditional breeding, we cross plant A by plant B, and we bring all the good, the bad, and the ugly. So a targeted approach of insertion of a gene or gene editing allows you to target the trait of interest without affecting the rest of the system. Again, not every trait. Again, we have multiple copies. We need to have regulations, regulatory systems in the genome and all of that. So we need to take that into consideration. When we're looking at, let's say, biofortification versus transformation versus insertions, Well, we need to look at it. What are the possibilities, the utilities for particular traits? Is it a trait a highly complex one, or is a simple trait? Sometimes with complex trait, a gene insertion is not going to do the job. You still need additional sources. So it depends on the trait of interest, the complexity of it. But also, I'm fascinated by the fact that gene editing right now, a lot of times you're going to achieve exactly what nature has done, but much simpler. But you are not creating anything new. You simply are editing something that you could have achieved with 10 back crosses or 8 back crosses or 6 back crosses. So why doing that if you can just insert? And, so think about germplasm, all the wild germplasm that we do not utilize because it's too difficult to bring in a good trait from it. And it takes years to make wheat to look like wheat if you bring from a wild relative. But now we can insert a gene. So it expedites the process. It opens the opportunity for diversity. So when people say, oh, but we're going to reduce diversity, I'm like, no, it's the other way around. You're bringing that diversity into our domesticated crops that a lot of times contain very little of that diversity that existed originally. So we can increase diversity by using these targeted approaches.
So that is approach dependent. So what fit where? So that is best.
And the traits, like in the case of BT, if it doesn't exist in plants, so we bring it from the bacteria. So that was all it did. That was what it cannot be by editing. But the same thing, we may discover other ways that plants can manage pests that we can utilize in the same way. So far, we haven't identified such, but that doesn't mean that scientists are not looking. We continue to look for those traits because the technology is there now.
So moving on to next one, Shakir Kazmi Shahid is asking what approaches can be employed to restore the natural state of agricultural land, considering that many farmers rely heavily on chemical sprays, which contribute to changes in the land's natural characteristics.
Yeah, and I think using more practices, label under different systems like agroecology or restorative agriculture. But what they have in common is increasing diversity of crops, of methodologies, of resource utilization, reducing the amount of synthetic chemicals. But synthetic chemicals have allowed production in a way that reduces the amount of land that we needed. And so we always need to keep that in mind, that intensification of agriculture allows us to protect a lot of land from deforestation. So when we think about conserving our ecosystems, we need to think about that there's a place for, let's say, intensification of agriculture, but it needs to be done in a sustainable way. In terms of our more industrial agricultural settings, and even with the small farms, being able to have crop rotation, learn more about, what are the plants that take the most nutrients from the ground versus the one that deposit more, legumes versus, let's say, maize. How do we grow them in combination? So go back to some of that indigenous knowledge that we know farmers have of why it works. They may not understand why it works, but they know it worked. So try to understand that. Try to benefit from that knowledge, traditional knowledge. And I think, again, it's diversity, rotate in. I think precision agriculture and anything that would allow us to more targeted approach to agriculture will be better. Broadcasting seed or broadcasting fertilizer is not the most efficient way. We know that a sprinkler irrigation is not as efficient as drip irrigation. So we're getting there. It's not about dropping something. It's just finding a more efficient ways to do it so that we can protect our environment and restore some of that. Planting sometimes cover crops allow us to bring back land. Like you've seen it when a land is really dry and it just like, oh, nothing grows there. You do a cover crop, you let it rest for a little bit, and then the structure of that soil is recovered, the water retention is recovered. So we need to do more of that.
So there is a question from Asifa. She's saying, thank you for the insightful conversation. I have a few questions for you. Firstly, what advice would you give to early and mid-career researchers on how to establish connection and partnership with scientists like yourself?
I think it's again engaging in the community, asking questions, joining some of the webinars, the conference, reading the papers, reaching out. But also your science need to be relevant to the different groups, and don't take it personal if it's not. We're not in the USA a dollar bill that everybody wants us because or needs it. It's because it depends on your area of expertise. So what do you have to offer that is something that, let's say, my laboratory will be in need of? So by knowing better my lab, following some of our papers, you say, I have an idea. Instead of saying, oh, I have this background and I would like to be in your lab, saying like, I have an idea, I have this expertise that I think your laboratory can use for X, Y, or Z project. Have you considered doing this? I would love to show you more about my preliminary data. Something like that allows for people to be more like, oh, tell me more. Or you say like, I'm fascinated with this area of expertise. I'm already doing this, but I think, talking with you for, let's say, 30 minutes will really answer some of my questions. And most people will be willing to do that because you're showing true interest. It's not just a generic interest, it's a true interest in their area.
Many questions they are asking how we can get your email ID for further communication on research, and how we can collaborate with you. And I think Shubho can read those questions. All technical question I have done so far. So
yeah. So in terms of connecting, again, you have my information. You can just Google me, but also in LinkedIn and in social media. So I'm Maricelis Acevedo at Cornell. If you just do search, you will find me. And in terms of collaborations, look at my projects. I do not have a research program, like I mentioned, here at Cornell. I have research programs around the world. So a lot of my collaborations are going through that, but I am a committee member for many students. Their advisors and their students communicate with me and say, your area of expertise, is sick in this particular project. We don't have that expertise. Would you be willing to? And then I consider, remember, I have also a lot of responsibilities, and there's that many hours of the day. So if I say a no or not now, it doesn't mean anything that I think little of the work that you're doing or that I don't value it. It's that at this time I'm already overbooked. But I normally will, if you cannot work with me and I know of somebody that is looking for somebody with your expertise, I will let you know, hey, you should contact this person. And so I'm here to help in any way I can. Thank you. And thanks for the interest.
Thanks. Yes, already you say that it is a hyper-connected world. So find someone is not too much busy nowadays.
No.
And if you are a scientist, then it's also easy. Because then a few other sites also will help, like Google Scholars, Scopus,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
other things also.
Yeah.
So it's a great talk, and for my point of view, is a great advice today we collect from your talk, and everybody's loved it. And currently is 775 people lively watch to your webinar, and we are collecting many feedbacks from the, actually we have put a Google form in the YouTube chat box for the feedback and what they are expecting from Bioingene. So future webinar topics and all. So it's going to be we're collecting the feedback 5 to 6 hours from now.
Okay.
But I'll request Shoma to give some about idea. I already shared the feedback link in the Zoom's chat box. Shoma will conclude. Shoma, please conclude the session. Then stop the live streaming, and also go for the feedback. How many countries or participants are just submit their
Yes, I was just going through the
yes. Yes.
feedback. This is live, and many people are. It's a live.
Yes, and it's going to be live for more 5 hours. Okay.
So many countries have joined. I will just shout out to everybody and thank you for joining. So in an alphabetical order, I'll just
Yes.
we have people from Algeria, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Brazil, Cameroon, Canada, China, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Ghana, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Morocco, Nepal, Niger, Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, Tanzania, Tunisia, Uganda, and Zimbabwe.
Fabulous.
So it's amazing to see how we have connected so many people.
And because in plant science, what we realize then build the bioengine, we are very few people are scientists, and among them, very few people are plant scientists.
Yeah.
So bring them in a one platform is our goal, and also we are somehow motivated, somehow connected, and also it help us to search some people like such a reviewer, such an editor is nowadays very easy for such a bioengine webinar and all, and it's helpful us. And we have a special session also, Women's in Science, where we invite others, those are not from the plant science, but have some qualities and have some experience. So we are not let them also from the bioengine. So we create a special sessions, special webinar where we interact for 3 to 4 personnel in a one webinar, and we are discuss more about how they can because today also many people are asking for doing a webinar for how to write a project
Okay.
proposal webinar related. So again, I'm going to search someone for project proposal and all. And once again, the Professor Asgado for joining us to educate us on your journey. It's a very encouraging, and yeah, definitely in the future, because very few people we found those support the BT, those for the GM. So it's a great honor for us to connect with you because somehow we know that you are there. So yeah, we can we can mail them that someone asks to do that, is this right or not. So it's obviously we get some advice from you in the future, because we are all in a very young stage of this science. So thanks, and thanks Priyanka, thanks Soma, thanks all the participants who have joined in live. It's now about 800, but it's going to be thousands and thousands in few hours and days. So I appreciate all of you. Thanks for joining. We will meet once again very soon, end of this month, and that time I try to bring one scientist who actually from scientist now he's an entrepreneur. So he starts to business on that. So it's just very near to me. So I asked them to how, because we are very we always think that the starting a business is very difficult, but
Yeah.
for a plant scientist starting a business or that type of thing, I also try to encourage, because many peoples are when they're registered, I found they are from the business background, entrepreneurs. So we should something for them also. So let's see what happens. Thanks once again.
Thank
It's
you
a
so
great
much,
day.
Thank
Professor.
you
Yes,
so
yes,
much.
Thank you so much
yes,
for the invitation. I really appreciate it and enjoyed the interaction and the questions from the audience and the interest. I always learn something. I'm more curious about what people want to hear about and what are the questions. So thanks so much, especially for all of you early career scientists and mid-career scientists. Let me know how can I help. And I hope that some of the information that I provided today give you the strength and the ability to continue your professional development.
Yes, definitely. And in the future, if you have something to share our community, just email us. We are happy to
Perfect.
share, because I think we have a 23,000 people email address in a
Okay, perfect.
one Google group. So when
Okay.
we send something, it goes to 23 plant loving people. So so okay, we can think something. And Priyanka, thanks once again. and keep your searching for such eminent scientists.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you
Professor
so much.
Acevedo, for accepting the invitation. It's a great, great honor for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, Soma, close the session. Okay, bye-bye. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Okay, bye.
Bye.